Hello, everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by Dr. Bradley Nelson, New York Times bestselling author of The Emotional Code and The Body Code, the powerful systems of helping people release their trapped emotions and restore balance. And exciting news. This December, Dr. Nelson's next book, The Heart Code, is coming out, diving deeper into the mind, body, and connection. Thank you, Dr. Nelson, for supporting the show and the healing work that's happening around the world. Today, I'm really excited because today we have a very special guest to the advisor, and I'm thrilled to introduce you to Dr. Scott. He's a leading voice in the intersection of physical, from stress physiology, brain chemistry, and cellular energy. You can learn more about his work at drscottsher.com. And he has a couple other websites he's going to tell you about that he's interrelated with. And today we're exploring how to modulate stress and respond by optimizing the GABA system and how to recharge the mitochondrial function, including a fascinating tool, methylene blue. Dr. Scott, I am so excited to have you on the show today. Please say hello to our guests and let them know a little about you and share some great things that you're doing right now.
Well, thank you for having me, Stacey. I'm a board certified internal medicine physician. I've been in practice for over 20 years. I actually grew up on Long Island in New York. My dad's a chiropractor for 45 years in a town called Northport. And so I grew up the son of a chiropractor, pretty alternative, went to medical school, trying to find ways to kind of integrate the allopathic conventional world and the alternative world that I grew up in. I kind of navigated multiple ways and avenues throughout my career. I was involved in hyperbaric oxygen therapy for many years. It's a great technology for healing and accelerating performance. And I have a group of people that I work with in a nonprofit called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, or Home Hope for short, that I signed on to work with in 2017. And we train practitioners on how to optimize health. And out of that nonprofit, which we all donate our time to, we created a company called Transcriptions, which helps people right now on their path of optimizing their health, which, for many people, it doesn't happen immediately. Like if you've taken 40, 50 years to feel the way you do, you want to feel better tomorrow, but it can take a little while to get there. And so what I've been talking about a lot lately in the kind of the context of helping people right now is breaking what I've been kind of referring to as something called the sympathetic spiral of doom. And it sounds quite ominous, but the challenge is that so many of us are in fight or flight all the time. Our stress response is up, up, up. And what happens when that's the case is that it really has a significant detrimental effect on the part of our cell called the mitochondria. The mitochondria part of our cells that make energy. And when we have too many stress hormones, your cortisol, your stress neurotransmitters like norepinephrine and dopamine that are always kind of hammering the mitochondria get under a lot of stress and they stop making energy as efficiently. And when that happens, it kind of puts out all these signals to try to make more energy, but you can't because the stress system is already overregulated, overdone. It's cooked. And so as a result of that, you get this sort of spiral where it's really difficult to break. And so one of the things we do at the company at Transcriptions is try to help people right now while they're on that path with the mitochondrial side, and also help them, break that sympathetic spiral, break that sympathetic overdrive that's happening at the same time. And that's where methylene blue comes in on the mitochondrial side, and that's where GABA comes in on the sympathetic overdrive side of things.
I can relate to that so much. I know so many people that it happens to. So many people are on the go all the time and they are under complete stress. And I can even vouch for myself, to be honest with you. There are many times
Sure.
that I am doing like tons of things. I feel so stressed because I'm just a multitasker and I'm doing this and that and the other thing. And I sometimes get so drained. And I could drink a cup of coffee and I drink black. I don't put anything in it. And then sometimes it doesn't even do anything for me. And then I'll
Yeah.
have another cup, and it's just, no matter what I do, it's not my energy level is not get into its optimal level that it's supposed to get. And I can tell you, I assure you, many people feel the same way. Now,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you suggest? And can you maybe explain why some of these things maybe possibly happen to people?
Yeah. I mean, the challenge, you and I grew up in New York, right? You have a good New York accent. I used to say coffee all the time, but it got beat out of me. Now I just say coffee because I lived in California for too long. But the New York hustle, man, like it's like you'll sleep when you're dead. It's the hustle culture that It's the sort of US American way, which is that you got to power through everything, that we can't relax. But the thing is that when we're kind of powering through everything all the time, that's our fight or flight nervous system. It's not supposed
Yeah.
to be on all the time. That's supposed to be on when we're getting chased by a lion or that we're trying to save ourselves from drowning in an ocean or something like that. As opposed to our what's called our parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest, digest, relax, and actually build, detox, and actually synthesize new muscle as well. And so the key for many of us that we don't realize is that we actually have to recover more than we're doing. And it's very difficult to do this though, because if you're always on all the time, as I was mentioning, it's very difficult to even shut down because when you do shut down, you can feel terrible because your system has just been so overclocked for such a long period of time that that mitochondria, that part of your cell that makes energy, just doesn't know how to even go at all. Whether you have a lot of stress or you don't, you're still going to feel like crap. And
Yeah.
so one of the key things here is that, and there's been a ton of interest as you and I were chatting about before we started recording on methylene blue recently, right? And this is a
Yes.
really great compound because it really does have this amazing effect on the mitochondria. And like a quick, quick sort of 411. Does everybody remember the 411 used to dial on the phone? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
information on, I feel like
Mhm.
I feel old when I say that. I was talking to somebody there in their 20s. They're like, for what? What are you talking about? So the big deal on the mitochondria is this is the part of the cell that makes our energy, right? And so we have some cells in our body that have tons of mitochondria, and we have some cells in our body that actually have very few mitochondria at all. And so actually the most mitochondria per cell are in eggs and sperm. This is not surprising because making a baby, especially for the female has the most mitochondria per cell in their eggs, by the way, more than the sperm, is a hugely energetic capacity requiring thing, right?
Yeah.
And so lots of mitochondria per cell in your eggs, also in brain, heart, liver, musculoskeletal tissue. So if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, how do you feel? Well, you can't have a baby. You're having a really difficult time conceiving. So many more people are going through IVF right now. I have a
Yeah.
friend right now doing it, and I've had previous ones as well. Brain fog, concentration problems, depression, anxiety. These can all be related to mitochondrial dysfunction in the brain because the brain requires so much energy to maintain your capacity. And again, if you don't have that capacity, you're going to feel it, right? And then
Yeah.
cardiac issues, detoxification issues, issues with exercise induced fatigue as well, muscle pain, inflammation. These are all things that could be mitochondrial in nature. And the reason why we have mitochondrial dysfunction, there's a couple big ones, but like the crazy statistic here is that 94% of US adults have some element of this mitochondrial dysfunction. So some
Yes.
element of having an issue making energy and detoxing from the energy that we make, because most people don't realize that you make energy. It's like we're a gasoline powered car. We don't just make it clean. We actually have, what are called quote unquote waste products that are
Mhm.
made when we make energy. And this is called adenosine triphosphate, by the way, ATP. That's our energy currency. And so we have carbon dioxide and water that we make when we make ATP. We also make something called reactive oxygen species. These are small molecules that are made that are reactive that kind of give signaling. But if you have too many, it can overburden your what's called your antioxidant system because antioxidants they neutralize those oxidative things, those reactive oxygen species. So you have 94% of US adults that have some element of dysfunction in that system, having the
Yeah.
symptoms that I just described. And then the major reason for that, sort of on the sort of the meta level, would be stress on the system, and that sympathetic overdrive. But
Yeah.
insulin resistance does it, toxins on our environment. So insulin resistance like diabetes or like high blood sugars, toxins on our environment, infections, post-infectious syndromes, even medications, common medications like metformin, proton pump inhibitors like Protonix and omeprazole, and things like that. And then many other drugs, even oral contraceptive pills and things that can affect mitochondrial function. So that's the kind of ecosystem that we're all living in now. Most
Yeah.
of us don't feel like we're at our best. Most of us, when I get, most of my patients, when they come to me, like their main two complaints, the one is always going to be energy. I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough energy. And two is that I can't wind down. I can't relax. I don't know how to relax. And so
Yeah.
on the energy side, this is where methylene blue can come in.
I like that. Now, in simple terms, what is the GABA system and why is it so central to calming the stress response?
Yeah, so GABA is our main neurotransmitter in our brain that helps us calm down the firing of the brain. So we have our superstar neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine and serotonin, and many of your listeners have heard of those before. But it's
Yeah.
actually the GABA system that actually is the brakes of the brain. And this is the one that gets depleted. GABA gets depleted very much in an overstressed brain, in a sympathetically fight or flight dominant brain. And when GABA levels go down, what happens is that you get more anxiety, more depression, and you get more insomnia as well. So the interesting thing here to kind of give the picture is that, on average, we have about 70,000 thoughts per day. That's
Yeah.
normal, baseline. Okay. If you're anxious, if you're stressed, depressed, you're going to have up to 120,000 thoughts per day. And your GABA
Wow.
system is what regulates that. It regulates the sensory information that's coming from your environment. And then it becomes a sort of like this waylay station between other neurons and other pathways to help you process and bring that information down into a, like, bite-sized, kind of like less
Yeah.
than like a 70,000 thoughts per day rather than 120,000. And so your GABA system is regulating all of that. And if it's not working very well, you're not going to feel well because you're going to have all this sort of overactivity, because GABA is always it's in balance with another neurotransmitter that I didn't mention yet called glutamate. And glutamate's your primary excitatory neurotransmitter. And then GABA is your primary inhibitory. And so they're
Mm.
supposed to be in balance with each other. And the greatest example of this in kind of an acute phase, well, there's two. The first one is the MSG syndrome. So you go to a Chinese restaurant, the food tastes good, and then 2 hours later, you have a massive headache. You feel tremulous, you feel irritable. This is when you have too much monosodium glutamate. So that glutamate rise very quickly is going to give you those symptoms. That's kind of like glutamate toxicity. And a lot of us feel like that on a regular basis because of that imbalance with the GABA. The other example, which is interesting, is alcohol. So many
Yeah.
people use alcohol to calm down, relax, and it works on the GABA system, actually, just like Xanax and Valium and Ativan and your sleep drugs like Ambien and Lunesta, et cetera. These are all working on the GABA system. But the problem with the anxiety medications and the sleep drugs and alcohol is that they bind to the GABA system so tightly that they actually deplete a lot of GABA
Mm.
in as a result of binding so tightly. And then the depletion gives that high level of glutamate. And so one of the reasons why you wake up 2 hours later after going to bed from drinking is because of that glutamate toxicity that you
Yeah.
get. I mean, you get the headaches and the irritability. And that's why I stopped drinking a long time ago, is because, I have 4 kids, and when they were young, and I go and have a couple of drinks with some friends on Friday, and like Saturday would just be atrocious. And I was like, I can't
Yeah.
do this with children, and just
Right.
anyway, so I stopped. But so that's one of the reasons why people have those symptoms when they drink alcohol. But the problem with alcohol and those other drugs is that they're very addicting because they deplete GABA over time, and then the whole system has to kind of respond to that, and then you have increased risk of tolerance. You need more to get the same effect, withdrawal if you stop it too quickly, and dependence, right? Because if you feel like
Yeah.
you're not drinking, or not taking those medications. But so the key really is to support the GABA in natural ways as much as possible. There are things like vitamin B6 and magnesium that are really good because it helps the glutamate convert over to GABA. There's also an amino acid called glutamine as well,
Mhm.
which is really important because glutamine is the primary substrate. It's the primary thing that converts into glutamate in the brain. And most of
Yeah.
your GABA is only made in the brain, actually. But this glutamine is actually the primary fuel of your small intestine. And
Right.
the small intestine is where a lot of people have like bacterial overgrowth or leaky gut and things like that. And so if you have
Yeah.
any of that stuff going on, you need more glutamate to actually support that. And so it could be harder to get enough to the brain. And it sounds good to think about, well, maybe I should just take GABA supplements, right? But the problem is that GABA itself is too big of a molecule to get into the brain. And
Yeah.
so if you take GABA supplementation and it works for you, it could be because you have what's called a leaky brain, a blood-brain barrier that's not doing what it's supposed to do by keeping things out. And if that's the case, well, that's pretty indicative that you have inflammation and things leaking in the system, probably leaky gut at the same time. So as a
Wow.
result, you really don't want to take GABA supplements. If you do and you feel good on them, you should get your gut checked out because you might have a leaky gut as well. So what we do at my company, Transcriptions, is we've created products that can really help support the GABA system very quickly, that are not GABA itself. We use things like Kava, CBD, CBG, which are non-psychoactive cannabinoids, CBN. We have the
Hmm.
other cool compounds one called agarin, which is from a psychedelic mushroom, actually the Amanita, and it's got the red cap and white spots. So people might know
Yeah.
it from Santa Claus mythology in northern Siberia, or Alice in Wonderland, Mario Brothers, and these kinds of things. But lots of mythology around them. But they're not psychedelic at low doses. And this one ingredient that we're using called agarine is not psychedelic at all at these low doses, but it's a long acting on that GABA molecule, on the GABA receptor, excuse me. And so it works just like GABA, but it's not GABA, so it can get across. And so we
Yeah.
combine some GABA things together for sleep, something called Troz at our company, and combine some things that work on the GABA system for anxiety and stress called Trocom. And that's Kava, CBD, CBG, and something called B3 GABA, which is a B3 attached to a GABA that gets across. And so once it gets across very easily, it gets a little bit of activation with the B3, which is NAD actually, and then you have the GABA on that other side. And so I know there's a lot of information for people, but in essence, what that means is that you can have a way of supporting the GABA system very quickly, and then that's the way you can break that sympathetic overdrive. You can break that pattern,
Yeah.
and then have people feel what it feels like to have a calm nervous system. Because people will tell you, "Oh, I feel calm all the time. I just as soon as I sit down, I fall asleep." I'm like, "No, that's just because you're just overtired and ready to go to bed." Like, how do
Yeah.
you actually? What does it feel like to feel calm? And there are ways to kind of if you wear, like, I have an Aura ring here that I wear, like you can actually measure your stress levels during the day now and kind of get a sense of this. But
Wow.
I can give Trocom to people, and all of a sudden their nervous system just down regulates, and they feel
Yeah.
calmer in about 30 minutes. And then it's all of
Yeah.
a sudden like, this is where we need to get you on a regular basis. And whether you're taking supplementation like this, or meditation, exercise, yoga, divorcing a partner, like, or sleeping in a new room and getting a sleep divorce, right? And
Yeah.
that's like that stress sympathetic overdrive stuff that all of us have to address over the long term. And it could be from so many different reasons, right? It could be from trauma when you
Yeah.
were a kid. It could be from a challenging relationship. It could be that you need to set new boundaries with your mother-in-law. It could be a lot of different
Right.
kinds of things. And all
Yeah.
that builds up. And so the GABA system really is the key to kind of the down regulation of that and supporting it so that you can start healing.
I love that. And I didn't realize that we could have a leaky brain. You always hear about the leaky gut and leaky gut syndrome, but you
Mhm.
never hear about a leaky brain. And you never realize because GABA is so popular. There's so many people out there taking GABA supplements that I don't think they realize what you just mentioned, that it is possible that you could it could affect the brain in a negative way if you consistently take GABA as a supplement.
Well, I think the main thing there to understand is that if it's working for you, you probably need to get addressed a leaky gut at the very least. A blood-brain barrier that gets leaky is actually quite dangerous over time. And what that means is that, the implication here is that the blood-brain barrier really is set up to protect you from various things that the brain should not get, like infections. Um,
Yes.
so what happened a lot after and during COVID was that people have severe infections, a severe COVID infection, you had like an instant leaky gut inflammation, and that all causes like an instant leaky brain at the same time. And
Right.
so you didn't have, quote unquote, any issues before you had COVID. But then after COVID, you have Lyme, you have mold, you have EBV, you have all these other things, is because that blood brain barrier became more porous and allowed
Right.
things that were in your body already, most likely, to become more active and then get into the brain that way. So the key with that is to really optimize your diet, your lifestyle, supplementation, doing directed work on foundational biochemistry. And that's what I do in my clinical practice. And that's what that nonprofit is all about, that health optimization medicine and practice nonprofit, because that really trains practitioners on the foundational ways of thinking about that.
I like that a lot. Now, many listeners live in flight or fight. What are the telltale signs of breaking the system and trying to keep up when it comes to when it comes to GABA, like from lifestyle to breath work to targeting different areas. What are the most reliability support that the GABA tone really supports?
I mean, anything that's going to calm down your nervous system is going to be helpful here. And that for
Mhm.
everybody, it's going to be a little bit different, but usually it's taking away the things, if you can, that are
Yeah,
causing the stress as best as you can, right? So I was making a quip, but like the idea that you can actually sleep in a different bedroom than your partner is actually something that's becoming more and more popular. About 50% of
yeah,
couples sleep in a different bedroom than their spouse or partner. for whatever reason. It could be snoring, it could be moving in bed, it could be taking all the covers. My
Yeah.
wife does those latter two things, but at least she used to until we had a king size bed. Now I don't even know she's there, but cannot sleep in a smaller bed with that lady, right? And so if you don't have that capacity, right, it's not, or if you have a snoring partner, for example, like taking away those inputs, the things that are causing the stress, or at least
Yeah.
becoming aware of what those things are. That's probably the first thing. It's like knowing is half the battle, is whatever that comes from, right? And so
Yeah.
if you understand what is causing it, then you can start addressing those causes. It could be things that, again, since you were a child, you felt unsafe because you were abused, and that's terrible. And you need to address that in various ways, or else that's your sympathetic fight or flight is never going to change, right? No matter what you try. Or if you had a severe hospitalization that required surgery or whatever, like that's actually a pretty traumatic thing too. And I've had multiple people that I've seen over the years that, like, you think that they should get better using the vitamins, minerals, diet, and all that kind of thing, but they don't, because you haven't seen that stress response come down. So the first thing is to look at what those stress inputs are. From there, it's now down regulating the nervous system by using things like meditation, mindfulness, yoga, yoga retreats. Go to Costa Rica for a week. These things can be very helpful, um, while you're also understanding what those triggers are for your stress response.
Yeah.
And then supplementation can be very helpful. I mentioned magnesium, B6, and glutamine. These are things I use on almost everybody when somebody's had this overactive stress response. But then again, I also look at, in addition, well, what else can I do right now? I use Trocom from our company Transcriptions. I use Troz from our company as well for sleep. These I find are great ways. I also use other things like what are there some supplements I use? I use CBD on its own sometimes, Kava on its own. I'll use valerian root for bedtime for some people as well, which can be helpful. Passion
Yeah.
flower, chamomile. There's some other ones you can use that are more. L-theanine is another one that can do it. If you're going through menopause, if you're in the perimenopausal time frame, your progesterone levels drop dramatically, and this is
Yeah.
why you can't sleep well, because progesterone helps you sleep. And so, thinking about getting on hormone replacement therapy can be helpful, or optimizing your progesterone levels can be really, really helpful, because that's going to help your sleep as well. And there's other things as well. I mean, the other thing is you want to make sure you're not using too many things that are actually that are depleting your GABA system, right? So if you're drinking lots of caffeine on a regular basis, that's going to deplete your GABA over time too.
Yeah.
Stimulants in general, all stimulant categories, even opioids, like opioid drugs, actually make your GABA system less sensitive, and that's why one of the reasons why you require more narcotics or opioids over time to do it. There's other drugs that will also, decrease your GABA system, like THC, for example. THC actually blocks your GABA system. This is why a lot of people that take THC will get like a reactive anxiety from it, for example. So got to be
Mhm.
thinking about that as well. And then, like, the other key here really is that, like, when you're down regulating the nervous system and you're trying to calm down that sympathetic overdrive, at the same time, we have to be very careful to support the mitochondria while we're doing this. Because if I just decrease your immune system, your sympathetic fight or flight response, and I don't support the mitochondria at the same time, you're not going to feel very good, and it's going to be hard for you to maintain at a lower sympathetic tone, lower fight or flight, because you don't feel good, right? So this is where the methylene blue part of the conversation comes in. That might be cool to talk about too.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about methylene blue. What is methylene blue and why do the clinicians consider it a mitochondrial and redox support system tool?
So methylene blue has been around for a long time. It was actually developed in the 1870s as a textile dye that dyed blue jeans blue, crazily enough. And then in 1897, they figured out that it helped treat a particular organism called malaria. And it was used like that as an antimicrobial for about 50, 60 years until antimicrobials came around. So higher doses of methylene blue, less than or greater than about a milligram per kilogram, about 50 to 70 milligrams and above, is a great
Yeah.
anti-infective, antimicrobial, great for significant acute mitochondrial stress and trauma and inflammation. And then the latter reasons why we know this is that we know that methylene blue also concentrates in the mitochondria. It actually concentrates in there. So when you take it orally, especially at low doses like 4 milligrams, 8 milligrams, 16, like these are great mitochondrial support doses. And in the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about mitochondrial dysfunction. And like
Yeah.
this is where methylene blue comes in. It can compensate and enhance the capacity for you to make better energy. So you can feel more energy, but at the same time, really, not only does it help you with energy production, it also helps you with detoxification. And so most things that you take that increase your energy also put much more stress on your system. Caffeine is like this.
Right.
And nicotine's gotten a bad rap over the years, but nicotine is actually great for energy and focus and memory and cognition. But if you take too much nicotine, it's actually going to really clock your system. And of course, if you're taking too much, it can also be addicting as well. But low doses can be really great as an anti-inflammatory and things. But those are more things that enhance energy, but don't support the system at the same time with the detoxification. Where the redox component that you meant, that's what you mentioned, that word redox, that's where methylene blue comes in, where you're giving the capacity to not only make more energy, but also mop up waste products, both in the mitochondria and in the cell and other locations as well. And so you have this beautiful sort of ecosystem that you're able to create with like just a little bit of methylene blue. So it can help with people that are really having a difficult time with energy, difficult time with focus and brain fog and inflammation and pain. I've just seen countless stories over the years, Stacey. When we first started the company in 2020 at Transcriptions, we had a couple really early amazing stories. One was a lady with mild cognitive impairment, early 80s. Her granddaughter had bought some of our product, this product called Just Blue, which is low dose methylene blue, and gave her grandmother a half of what's called a troche, which our delivery device, which I'll talk about later, had just 8 milligrams of it. And all of a sudden, 30 minutes or an hour later, she started telling stories about her childhood in Mexico that nobody had ever heard before. It was, and then the family gathered around, and like she was just so grateful for this opportunity with her grandmother. And I had another lady, physical therapist, that had been out of work for 3 years from long COVID. Actually, this wasn't a long COVID. So this is a chronic mold story. And she had chronic mold. The mold was remediated in her body and in her house, and she was doing better numbers wise, but she still felt terrible. And then she started, and this is the reason why is because that could take a huge hit on your mitochondria. Your mitochondria take a huge hit when that happens. And so she just started a little bit of methylene blue, really 4 or 8 milligrams for a couple of weeks. And she was back to work in 2 weeks, back to being a physical therapist, doing manual kinds of work. So people, pain going away, inflammation improving, brain fog resolving. I have tons of long COVID patients that I've worked with over the years using methylene blue. And of course, it's not just the only thing that we're doing. It's in a multidisciplinary, multifactorial thing where you have supplements, diet, lifestyle, foundational biomarkers, tools, technologies, hyperbaric therapy, and downregulating nervous system, as we talked about earlier, et cetera. So it's not just one thing here. So let me be clear. But transformative, adding this particular compound in to the mix, right? So rebuilding, making more efficient these energy producing parts of your cell, and then your brain turns back on. Your ability to do exercise gets better. Your inflammation gets better. I had one lady with long COVID that had this chronic spinal inflammation from it that wouldn't go away, tried everything. And then, her last resort was, or the last thing that she had tried was the methylene blue. And her pain went completely away in a week. And so, so the thing about methylene blue is that it's not something that kind of builds up in your system. It's something that once you find the right dosing, you should know it pretty soon, pretty right away. And like in the sense that I always have people start off at low, typically 4 or 8 milligrams. And at Transcriptions at my company, we have something called the buccal troche, which is a dissolvable lozenge that goes between your upper cheek and gum. Cool thing about that is that it works faster. The ingredients stay more available because they don't go through digestion. And like the troche is really good at titrations. You can like have a quarter, half, or full. But with the blue ones, methylene blue is quite blue, so not everybody wants a blue mouth, and it's really okay to swallow them as well. But with the idea is that you can have these like low doses. You can start off at 4 milligrams, a quarter of a troche, and then increase the dose every 3 to 5 days until you find the dose that works for you. But it's not like you're waiting a month or 2 months to see if it's going to work for you. It's going to be the dose is ready or right when you find that it feels better when you take it. The only caveat to that is if you have like a chronic infection, for example, you may need to get to higher doses of methylene blue to get the infection mitigated rather than support just the mitochondria, which would be happening at lower doses. So always low and slow is the name of the game. And then the key additionally to this is, as you know as well, is getting good quality stuff.
Right. Exactly. Now I've seen it where it melts in your mouth and then it goes down your body. And then I've seen that those were the strips. And then I've seen the methylene blue in capsule form. But if you take it in capsule form, then it's going to go through the digestive system. So what's your intake on capsule form methylene blue?
Yeah, the most common way to get methylene blue right now is actually in liquid form. So liquids are everywhere. So when we first started our company in 2020, we were the only company that had a methylene blue containing product. Now, at the end of 2020, at the end of 2024, there are about 4 or 5 companies, and now there are about 60. And the majority of those companies are using liquid methylene blue from undetermined sources from other places with suspect trails of paperwork, as far as I can tell. The
Wow.
challenge with methylene blue, Stacey, is that it's not a natural ingredient. It's actually been made in a lab. And
Mhm.
so, as a result of the making of it in a lab, you can have contamination with heavy metals like lead, mercury, cadmium, and arsenic. And
Yeah.
we have a very trusted source that we've been using for 5 years. That's out of Korea and Japan. That what we do is we get the ingredient from the manufacturers, and then we get what's called a certificate of analysis that comes with it from the manufacturer, which is supposedly a third party analysis that's coming. But if it's coming from out of country, that can all just be a big Ponzi scheme as far as I'm concerned. Everybody's in cahoots with everybody else. And so we recheck here in the United States another independent lab for another certificate of analysis to ensure that it's meeting its quality standards.
Right.
And we've had to throw out thousands of dollars worth of material over the years, even with trusted sources. And so what's unfortunate is that most companies, not even just for methylene blue, but for other ingredients, are just trusting these certificates of analysis that are coming from other countries and not doing the additional step of actually testing it here in the United States. And so what we found as a result is that we've done a bunch of testing on the liquids, especially, and some of the capsules we're actually in process of testing right now. But the liquids, for example, they never meet their label claim for potency, meaning that it says it's X amounts of milligrams per dose. It's typically about 50 to 60% of what they say it is. And
Okay.
and the other aspect is the heavy metal content, which is typically higher. And the other issue with liquids, especially, is that, and one of my biggest pet peeves is that people really have no effing clue how much methylene blue they're taking if they're taking in a liquid dropper. And
Right.
and I know exactly how much they're getting in a troche because it's precision dosed. We test every
Yeah.
one of them to make sure it's exactly what it says on the label. And like whenever I ask somebody that's taking a liquid, well, how much are you taking? They're like, take 2 droppers full. I'm like, well, do you have any idea how much that is? They typically have no idea how much they're taking.
Yeah.
And that's obviously dangerous because like anything else, and we can talk about this, there are some risks for taking methylene blue, and you should know how much you're taking and why you're taking it and why you're going to take it for a short or a long period of time.
Right. And I think that's important because I think a lot of times people are taking different supplements and not really understanding how much to take, how much, especially in droppers. People think that,
Right.
a lot of times they'll fill it up and or they'll just whatever it comes out, and then they'll take it, not realizing that you have to be very, cautious on how much you're taking and how much the label says to take, because you could easily overdose yourself.
Easily, yeah. And then, or even be underdosing yourself and thinking you're taking a certain amount. And we've had a
Yeah.
couple of people, I have a practitioner, a colleague of mine that has Bartonella in California, and she was taking 8 milligrams in a liquid of methylene blue and felt okay. And then she started taking our stuff, 8 milligrams in a troche form, and she
Yeah.
felt entirely different. She's like, this is
Right.
entirely different than the liquid. And liquids often degrade faster as well. And so it's a big problem, right? Because most people are getting their supplements on Amazon these days, and
Yeah.
Amazon's probably the worst place to get your supplements from. No matter if you're taking methylene blue or anything else, because unfortunately, there's tons of counterfeit stuff on Amazon. You don't know exactly what you're getting, even if it's from a reputable brand. I know there's a company called Metagenics, for example, that's been around forever that had millions of dollars of counterfeit stuff in Amazon warehouses that were being shipped to
Yeah.
customers with Metagenics on the label, and it was
Yeah.
basically just there's nothing in the actual capsules. And so I always recommend that you buy directly from the manufacturer. This also supports the manufacturer as well, rather than Amazon taking a big cut of the profits of
Right.
the supplements and everything else that's on there. So kind of a plug to go to your favorite retailers for supplements and things, and other types of things as well. I would recommend off of Amazon if you can. I know it's
Yeah.
easy. I order things off there all the time, so I'm as guilty as anybody else is. Except I do not buy supplements off Amazon almost ever,
Yeah.
and something just to be considerate. When you're looking at where you're going to buy methylene blue, we have our company called Transcriptions. You can find stuff on our website with a number of different varieties and doses and combinations as well. We have one with methylene blue that also contains nicotine, caffeine, and
Mhm.
CBD. And this is one, it's called blue cannatine. It's great for focus, productivity, and getting things done. And
Yeah.
it's really great low doses of everything. So People get worried about nicotine, but nicotine, as I was mentioning earlier, is actually really a great anti-inflammatory. It decreases your immune system overactivation. It actually helps with actually relaxing the nervous system because it actually activates something called your vagus nerve, and
Right.
it's great for memory and focus and recall and verbal fluidity and all those kinds of things. Low doses, less than 4 milligrams per day. Do not vape. Do not smoke nicotine, please, ever, because it has other things in there that'll make it more addicting. But in any regard, that's kind of a little side note. But the idea here is that don't buy your supplements on Amazon if you can at all avoid it for the reasons I've just described.
Yeah, and even with Metagenics, they forbid people who sell it, vendors who, usually they're bought by doctors to sell in their own practices, and they're not allowed to sell it anywhere but through the website of Metagenics. So it's,
Right,
to find it on Amazon is kind of odd, because a lot of
right.
companies, that are, or are created by doctors or scientists, those supplements are, straight through their site like yours.
Yeah, yeah, it's a big deal. And then I think the last thing to say about methylene blue would be just the safety aspect of it, in the sense that if the main thing to kind of think about here is that methylene blue does work as a mitochondrial enhancer, as we mentioned, but it also
Yeah.
increases a couple neurotransmitters, including norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. So it can increase your mood or improve your mood, which is good. But if you're taking an SSRI, an SNRI, which is kind of the newer generation of
Yeah.
antidepressants, dopaminergic drugs like a Parkinson's medication, you have to be
Hmm.
careful because there can be an interaction here. That
Yeah.
interaction's not likely to be an issue, especially at lower doses, like 4, 8, 16 milligrams of methylene blue. But
Yeah.
but I still recommend if you're taking any of those medications that you work very closely with a healthcare provider to make sure that all is well and that you go slowly with increasing your dose. The other group of people, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, please don't take methylene blue. If you have high blood pressure, some people that take methylene blue will have their blood pressures go up and increase. So you have to be mindful of that and watch your blood pressure closely. If you're on blood pressure medications, though, I would recommend working with a provider and not doing it on your own. The other
Hmm.
thing that everybody has to know taking methylene blue is that your urine will turn blue when you take it. And so don't be surprised. It's okay. If you've had your B vitamins in the morning and you usually have bright yellow urine, you'll notice that you have green urine as a result of that. If you're super dehydrated, it'll also get green as well. So be aware of these kinds of things. And the final thing to talk about with methylene blue would be detox kinds of symptoms. So when you're taking methylene blue, the system is kind of recalibrating itself. Sometimes you can get a little headache, little irritability, little GI distress, inflammation. It's typically not that significant if you start low with your dosing and increase it
Right.
over time. But if you bash yourself with a high dose, all of a sudden with a chronic issue, you might feel kind of gnarly as a result of that. So I just kind of give those things as warnings. And if you are taking really any medications, you really should always work with a provider to make sure that there's no interactions with, any supplements that you're taking, including if you're considering methylene blue alongside, your prescribed meds.
Right. Now, beyond methylene blue, what additional mitochondria supports that you often consider, like nutrition fundamentals,
Sure.
light exposure, movement patterns, heat, cold, minerals, etc.?
All those things are good. Yeah. I mean, the way I frame it, I have a whole program that I work on with people. It's called Health Optimization Medicine. And we look at foundational biomarkers, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, cofactors, things like your heavy metal exposures, your fatty acids, your micronutrients like your B vitamins, your capacity to make energy, your mitochondria. So you really want to try to focus on supporting all of that at the same time if you can, but supporting all of that at the same time takes time. It doesn't happen immediately where you start seeing or feeling the benefit. And so that's where methylene blue can really come in nicely. But getting outside, getting good sunlight, getting enough vitamin D exposure. Vitamin D is really important. Optimizing your hormones, optimizing your gut. These are really important because if your gut is inflamed, everything else, including your mitochondria, aren't going to be happy too.
Yeah.
So I wish it was just a magic pill that everybody could take and mitochondria would be beautiful, and then that's all you needed to do forever and ever for a long time, living happily ever after. But that doesn't happen, right? So methylene blue is
Right.
great because it can really support the system right away, and it can be really great over the long term to periodically help you. But hopefully, you need less methylene blue over the long term because you're supporting the mitochondria in the other ways, and then you can use it more as needed for things like endurance and travel, and when you have a more stressful event or environment. I always give the example of flying because when we go on an airplane, it's a pretty stressful event for most of us because, well, number one, it's stressful. You're going to go through the airport, take off your shoes and, get a cavity search. But the other aspect is everybody needs pre-check, by the way. If you don't have pre-check, I don't know why you're flying, but, unless you're flying like once a year, but flying, you're also at 8,000 feet pressurization, which means you're at low oxygen levels when you're on an airplane. If
Yeah,
anybody has this experience, I do, when they close the cabin door to start pulling back from the gate, they
yeah,
immediately pressurize the cabin. You get tired because your oxygen
yes,
levels go low immediately because
right,
you're going from so typical sea level oxygen pressure, oxygen levels of percentage is about 21%. At
yeah,
8,000 feet, which is you're pressurized on a plane to about 8,000 feet, it's about
yeah.
16%. So that's why you get low oxygen levels. You feel like crap. One of the reasons why you have jet lag. So methylene blue can come in here and help really to help support that capacity for you to make energy, even those lower
Yeah,
oxygen levels. So methylene blue is a great travel companion, and I recommend it to everybody that travels that's safe to take it.
that's a great idea. Now, can you share a case example of that where the GABA upgrade in your mitochondrial function created a major shift?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have a lot of patients that kind of fall into this category where it's the sympathetic spiral of doom, and trying to break it requires both the downregulation of that sympathetic, that fight or flight nervous system, and at the same time supporting mitochondrial function. So I have a few patients that had this ongoing. They had seen a number of providers before me. Nothing seemed to work, no diet changes, no lifestyle changes. But then what we did is we addressed the sympathetic activation using a combination of practices like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, using TROCOM and TROZ, but also addressing things like profound stress in their life. So one of them got a divorce. The other one ended up getting ketamine therapy for trauma, and did really well with that. And then I was supporting their mitochondria at the same time using methylene blue, other things as well. But that was the way they broke it. That was the way they were actually able to like heal, really actually see the benefits of both feeling better now, but also feeling better long term and sustainably.
I love that. Now, what are your first two or three steps for a listener who feels overwhelmed but wants meaningful progress this week?
My first step is always going to be awareness, right? The idea is if you can be more aware of how much time you're spending in that activated time frame, you will
Mm,
realize that you're probably spending too much in there, right? And then
yeah,
the awareness of what's causing those things is are there things that you feel like you have control over now or not? And
mm,
then the understanding that sometimes we don't have control of everything right away, and that's okay.
yeah,
And sometimes we can just address what we can. And this could be something like, well, let's downregulate the nervous system. Let's try some Trocom today and see how
yeah,
my nervous system feels. Or let's try some methylene blue now and see how my mitochondria are working if I give them a little bit of extra support, a little bit more energy, a little more detox. So my steps would be number one, awareness, right? Like try to like understand where you're at and why, and see if we can try to get like a glimmer of like why you feel the way you do. And the best way
yeah,
to do that is to focus on that stress, that sympathetic overdrive. Like are you in it? The answer is probably. And the answer and then sort of the secondary part of that is like, well, what's causing it? Is it work? Is it family? Is it things that I haven't addressed when I was a kid because of trauma? Like if you can have that conversation with yourself, it's going to go a long way. And then the second
yeah,
thing I would do is, try to feel like it feels to actually relax. And then, so that could be taking a long walk in nature. Or it could be taking something like Trocom or Troz to get better anxiety relief or better sleep, respectively, to see how it
yeah,
feels to feel less activated. And then the third thing I would do is support that mitochondria, right? So that would be trying a little bit of methylene blue, see if it supports it, gives you more energy, gives you uh, more capacity to do more, exercise more, move more, with a little bit
yeah,
more sustainability as well. So again, everybody's a little bit different here, but I think awareness is the big one, and then interventions that you can do
mhm.
now would be helpful to kind of get a feel for how they're going to make you feel, and then from there you can get like you kind of want to widen out again and say, okay, this is how I'm going to kind of address some of these things more long term.
I like that. Now, for self experimenters, what's your guidance working with a practitioner, tracking outcomes and knowing when to adjust or to stop?
I always recommend working with a practitioner if you can, because that's the best way to kind of get a more objective view on how you're actually doing.
Yeah,
Men are very bad at this typically, just by nature. Women are better at being more sort of meta aware of what's going on. But even then, it's better to have. I mean, the other thing, if you don't have a practitioner, is at least to try to follow objective data. So if you have an Oura
Yeah.
ring, as I was mentioning earlier, you can use the ring or use another tracker to see, well, how is your daily stress? How is your sleep? How is your ability to exercise? Like, are you getting the exercise? So you can use some objective data to help you. That would be my other sort of secondary if you don't have a practitioner to work with. And then, then don't think you're alone in this life. We have people there that can help you. There's psychologists and psychotherapists and things, but there's also support groups and peer groups and
Yeah.
clubs and family and things like that. So we are a species that requires this kind of support. We're not supposed to be on our own. There's a direct correlation or indirect correlation. So the more alone you feel, the shorter you're going to live. So
Yeah.
surround yourself with people that love you, or if you don't have that, that's okay. There are plenty of ways to find people that have, things in common with you now, support
Yeah.
groups, meetup groups, and all these kinds of fun other ways to start getting yourself going.
I love it. Now, if you had to take today's conversation, you wanted to emphasize on some important factors, what are some of the things that we talked about today that you'd love the listeners to walk away with?
The sympathetic spiral of doom, of course. So knowing that this is happening and knowing that you can do something about it, knowing you can do
Yeah.
something about it by creating more awareness, creating some interventions right now to calm down your nervous system and support mitochondrial function, that you're not alone, that this is everybody is sort of, especially Americans, we're just kind of by nature, more stressed. We're more panties in a bunch crew, right? And we have a hard time relaxing. And so, but there are ways to do this, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time and a lot of money for you able to do it. But the awareness is key, and just going step by step. Trying to find things that can relax you. Give it a try. There's a couple things at my company at Transcriptions that might be really very, very helpful for you here. Trocom and Troz, and then our Just Blue specifically from the mitochondrial side of things.
I love it. Now, what are some of the products and services that you offer?
So you can check it out at transcriptions.com. That's our website. You can check out our Just Blue, which is our pure methylene blue, our blue carnitine, which is a combination. Blue carnitine is a combination of methylene blue, nicotine, caffeine, and CBD. So this is great for focus, productivity, very safe if used as directed. And then our Trocom and Troz are great for sleep, stress, anxiety mitigation, and things like that. You can check it all out at transcriptions.com. We also have an Instagram at Transcriptions. I have my own personal one at Dr. Scott Sher, DrScottSher. And then my website, drscottsher.com. It's the same as the Instagram. It's just a .com at the end without the at symbol in the beginning. And the nonprofit is called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice, or Home Hope is the short, and we have homehope.org as the website. You can check out more information if you're a practitioner looking for more training. You don't have to be licensed. You just have to have an interest in science and biochemistry to get really into the weeds and see how you can help people foundationally.
I love it. I love it. Well, this has been amazing, Dr. Scott. I'm so happy that you came on the show and you really educated people, especially with blue methylene. I think it's something that you hear a lot about nowadays, but people really have to understand, what it's about. And also with the GABA system, people
Yeah.
hear about it, but they don't really understand. So when we have people like you who come on the show and really give a detailed explanation about it and, things to do to really help with, calm stress levels and to improve your overall body and your energy. These are things people struggle with on a daily basis all the time. And as you know, 100% of illnesses are caused by stress. So, it's really important to live a life and try to get us, even in this world, try to get us to a level of calmness where it's healthy for our bodies and we can wake up feeling refreshed and energetic and we don't have to drag our feet all day long. And, I really thank you for coming on the show, really sharing your advice and really, putting out these products that are so beneficial and that help thousands of people. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do. And I just, I thank you so much for, helping people like you do.
Thank you for having me, Stacey. It's been my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you. You have a great day.
As you.